With us right now, Matt Aponte. Matt, you're the author of the book, The Art of Kicking Ass and Taking Names. You're found on the web at themattaponte.com. Matt, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. Real honor to be a guest.
Absolutely. So Matt, high level, go ahead and we'll certainly talk about, how to kick ass today, but yeah, give us an overview of your great work.
So I'm a personal empowerment coach with a background in neurology and psychology. I'm a certified neurolinguistic programmer, also a hypnotherapist as well. So I use all of the skills that I've essentially just refined over the years to make myself a better entrepreneur and to unlock my future success. And I turn that into essentially a coaching curriculum or program where I help other entrepreneurs and high-level achievers, or as I'd like to call hustlers, to kind of be able to break through whatever glass ceilings they've created for themselves, which we all do through life, so that we can achieve the success that they are searching for.
What are some case uses where NLP and or specifically, I'm curious about on the hypnotherapy, which is completely different, but what are some case uses? Let's start with hypnotherapy, where hypnotherapy would be a really effective tool for helping with something that's going on in a busy professional's life.
Yeah, so I'll actually use an example of one client, particular young entrepreneur. So hypnotherapy is one of those things that's not just, thrown around and used all the time. It's very, whenever there's really deep seated either trauma or beliefs that they're just having a really hard time getting over, even after going through some of the processes I take them through consciously of trying to kind of override those things and move past. So they're really good in the instances of, let's say if you're fighting any kind of addiction, especially if that addiction has been triggered due to some kind of trauma in the past, which is most of the times how it happens. And through hypnosis, then we're able to kind of go really deep into the deepest parts of the subconscious mind, reframe some of those things. And so like, for instance, there was one who had an addiction with cannabis. And while cannabis itself isn't bad, it was just allowing, it's not productive, right?
Right.
You're constantly in that, and it kind of, puts you in a space where you're not too productive, at least for this person.
Yes.
And so that was where hypnotherapy in that instance was really good to kind of help him break through that. And once that happened, he was able to achieve a lot more things, feel more productive, and move forward from there.
For someone who's not experienced hypnotherapy, can you kind of maybe explain the experience? So, unfortunately, I think you've got, the stage performers, we turned it into like entertainment performance and that sort of thing. But hypnotherapy is a really great tool. And can you, again, kind of explain it from a more of a therapeutic and just kind of a discovery process?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because, as far as quote unquote mainstream hypnotherapy is kind of just that, making people cluck like a chicken on stage and doing those kind of things. But Tony Robbins actually uses hypnotherapy in different forms. And really, from a therapeutic sense, hypnotherapy is just bypassing the conscious and analytical mind and accessing the subconscious and being able to, once we've been able to do that, then we can kind of go in like code writers or software programmers, find where that bug is, find where maybe there's a virus or whatnot, or a glitch in the system, and reframe that or rewire that, so to speak. So that way, those type of things that are causing a hindrance or a block can be removed or replaced.
Yeah. And like, what would be maybe some other examples of, I guess if we were to start rattling off, if you've ever experienced X, Y, Z, you might consider hypnotherapy.
Yeah, self-sabotage. It's a very common thing with entrepreneurs, fear of success, reaching heights in a business that have never been reached before. Maybe, multiple six figures is one thing, but seven figures just seems to be that one thing that's always out of reach, no matter how many tries they may have, or maybe they'll get close and then kind of fall back and get close. So if you experience these kinds of things in your life where you're hitting the ceiling and you're not able to maintain that level, then I guarantee it's due to some sort of deeply programmed limiting belief that we all experience as children. And so a very common one is fear of success, or fear of not being good enough or worthy enough. And so imposter syndrome, over 78% of the United States experience some sort of imposter syndrome. And so hypnotherapy can be used to go back and identify a time in the past, maybe when your father or your mother or your older siblings kept telling you you weren't good enough, or you'll never make it, or, you're too fat, or you're too skinny, or whatever it is. We can address that through certain types of calls where we can kind of regress you back to that time in a safe environment. We can identify those, kind of release them psychologically, and then replace them and reframe them in a positive aspect. And so that's one of the more common ways that I use hypnotherapy with my clients.
Yeah. Hey, so I did this, I don't even remember what we talked about, to be frank with you, but what I do remember, so this was about, I must say about 20 years ago, that I did this. And my experience, I physically, felt like I was taking ayahuasca. Like it was like a very euphoric experience for me. I felt like I was kind of like floating and kind of everywhere and nowhere. Like, how do you know, like, why is that? And again, it's all kind of coming from the brain or whatever, but what's going on in the brain that we have those physical sensations? And again, anyone who's not tried this, your mileage may vary on like what it is for you, what your experience is like, but man, it was just, it's like, physically, the sensation was pretty incredible.
Yeah. So essentially what ayahuasca, psilocybin, some different plant medicines will do, of which I've actually done in a ceremonial situation as well, is they put your brain in a different brainwave state. And so usually those lower brainwave states like alpha, theta, delta are associated with increased neurotransmitters like serotonin or dopamine, rather, to really get you feeling good, euphoric, one with yourself. And so what I do regularly actually is I use isochronic tones that I've created over the past year to get my brainwave state into a deep theta meditative state. And so there you can do a lot of creative solving. You can do a lot of creative planning, visualization, a lot of these things of which I take all of my students and clients through. And what you're talking about coming out of that deep theta, which is really associated with a vivid dream state. So it's almost kind of like you're having a really vivid dream, you're sleeping and it's crazy, you can see yourself there, and then someone wakes you up. And then you wake up and it's like, you're really just kind of like, whoa, you have to kind of get everything going. And it's really, all it is just associated with a different type of brainwave state that you're pulling yourself out of.
Yeah. Now, imagine then that you are able to start chipping away at those, those deep rooted, kind of like maybe it's ideas about success or money. I know, I heard some pretty negative messaging about money early on in my life, that rich people were bad or somehow stealing or manipulating or not being fair or whatever. I don't believe that logically, but, at a deep level, sometimes I've caught myself, it's particularly, I'd say earlier on in my life, and I'm like, wait a minute. Am I not doing this thing because I have a fear of success? And it's very subtle. It's those negative beliefs. Like it's hard to even consciously identify them sometimes. But again, someone's like, well, why didn't I do this? Why was I afraid of this? Why was I, and we start asking our questions like that. We're like, yeah, I guess I don't know why I did that. And, that's where that exploratory, you could kind of start to discover that, understand it. I guess, Matt, where I'm going to get to with this question is, I know that this is an effective tool. I wish I remember what it was that, I can't remember what the issue was that I went into. I had a friend who was a hypnotherapist. I said, come on in, blah, blah, blah. It was a great experience. I can forget what it was. I was like, yeah, I want to work on X, right? And I don't even remember what it was, but I just, again, like I said, I remember it was an extremely positive experience. Is this something that you kind of have to go back over and over and over again? Or is it kind of a, hey, yeah, usually your first session, you could probably do some serious damage on that negative thinking or the limiting beliefs?
Yeah, it really all depends on how deep seated it is. Because sometimes we'll experience things in our 20s, like let's say if we went to college or if we started our first new business, and we experienced setbacks there. And maybe prior to that, we didn't have anything that was kind of droned into us as a child. And so those are on a higher layer. But like, for instance, I'll give you a quick example of myself. I was raised in a very extremely strict religious upbringing. And so it was a very common theme. Money is the root of all evil. Really rich people are, bad. It was kind of that whole thing. And so for me personally, it took multiple workings on layers. So I would work on a layer through the help of getting hypnotized myself or NLP through my own mentors and coaches. And then I'd be fine for a while. And then I would discover a deeper layer. And so for me, it took a little more work, but every person is, is different, because it really just kind of depends on how far back in your youth that particular, what I like to call code writing or programming, was made a part of your belief system.
Yeah. Okay. So sliding then over to NLP, what sorts of applications of NLP, like how do you see that getting facilitated effectively, like in a very productive way?
So the way that I use NLP is really through, because NLP is, for lack of a better word, a conscious way to an actionable way to address the subconscious, versus hypnotherapy is more of a passive, you put yourself in a very sedative state, and then we kind of go in and do that work. So NLP is neuro-linguistic programming, and essentially it's just understanding the communication model, so that way we can communicate with our own subconscious mind consciously. And so in the way that I use it with my students is take them through, give them the tools that they need to kind of identify. There's certain questions that you can ask yourself and your subconscious. It's like bringing up, writing. If you're a software developer, you can run a script and then boop, it brings up all of this code, and then you can identify it. And so what I do is, there's these specific questions I take them through, kind of give them some homework. They go through it and they identify the very first thing or feeling that come to mind, and they write it down. And so what I call is, that's essentially, we're debugging your system. And once we have all of that down, then we use NLP again in a certain way, with phrases done in a certain way. So that way our subconscious can receive and understand it, to essentially overwrite those those things about self-worth or fear of success or money or not being good enough, not being able to love or not being able to receive love, whatever that is. In a really quick kind of nutshell, that's really kind of what NLP is overtaking the subconscious consciously with physical actions.
Yeah. Just kind of browsing through your social media, I see that you've done some stuff around, I like that you're kind of addressing pain points, right? About like, are you a procrastinator? Here's some tips. Are you experiencing stress and anxiety? Here's some things that you could do. Let's grab one of those. Let's talk about like worry, for example. Like, I'm worrying about money. I'm worrying about no customers. I'm worrying about going out of business, right? Or whatever, like the stuff that comes up. I'm just maybe thinking of some stuff that earlier stage entrepreneurs might be, not just earlier, like, any business owner, like, this stuff might come up for you time to time. And it's like, when it creeps in, you're like, oh, come on, please. Like, let me just get to work and solve this problem. I don't need the worry. But any recommendations on like how to curb negative emotions like worry without necessarily, a 45-minute hypnosis session?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, it's important to realize that even someone myself who has many years of experience of doing this, you're never going to get perfect to a point to where you never have negative thoughts. So, number one, it's really important to understand that, because I think that that's a misnomer sometimes. People think that they're going to get to a point to where everything's super easy and they don't have to deal with negative thoughts. So, number one, that's important. What happens is just being able to recognize your thoughts, acknowledge where they're coming from, and then address them in that way. And so what do I mean by that? So usually most fears or worries are
Mhm.
are because we're trying to project ourselves in the future. Like, for
Mm.
instance, a perfect example was COVID, right? Oh, well, what's this going to do to my business? What can happen? What are some things that haven't happened yet? And so whenever we find ourselves spiraling into worry or anxiety or depression, it's mostly because we are feeling a lack of control. We're not able
Yeah.
to control the system immediately because it's going to happen, or we're afraid of it happening in the future. And obviously we can't address that because that's in a future time. So being in the now, in the moment, and saying, okay, you know what? I don't want to worry about the future. What can I do now? What are some steps that I can take now to kind of divert that from happening? So that's one tip. Another tip, really, which may have been played out, or a lot of people, is spending a little time with some meditation. Even I tell my students, just literally 5 to 8 minutes in the morning or in the evening when you can, just find some silence, sit there, focus on your breathing, and just kind of let your thoughts pass through your mind. Doing that really simple type of basic meditation and creating a practice with it, if not every day, but a few times a week, helps to curb that anxiety and to keep you more of in a what we call like a one state, a more calm state. So that way, when those worries and those anxieties do come, then we can address them. The last thing I'd like to share with your listeners is find out, why is it that I'm worrying? Because a lot of times we might be worrying because we have a million things to do and we don't know which one to do. And so
Yeah.
this analysis paralysis comes up, and then we either try to do it all or we don't do any of it. And so being able to take control of that in the moment is using, like I talk about in my book, a very simple method of choosing the top 3 or top 5 priorities and saying which ones are priority, which ones can I do today, and then attacking those and living in the now in that moment, because that allows you to then kind of take control of something and you feel like you're taking control, and that kind of curbs you, keeps you in the moment, and not allows you to really spend a lot of time in the future where we don't have any immediate control.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So tell me, Matt, about some of the folks that you work with. Like, who would be like a really, really great person to reach out, say, Matt, let's chat. Love for you to help me break through some of this stuff.
Yeah. So the perfect person is essentially who I was, over the last, 8 to 10 years of building, multiple businesses. And that person that has just really has done all the right things, right? You know what? I'm working, I'm hustling, I'm staying focused, I'm putting my goals to paper, and I hit this point and then I fall back. And if you
Mm.
can look back at, let's say, the last year or 2 years or however long you've been in business, and if you see this consistent rise and then a fall and then a rise and then a fall, like what I call essentially like, business on a roller coaster. And if you feel like you just can't get past, or it's so hard to get past that particular level or goal that you've been trying to, these are the people that I really enjoy working with the most. Because once we do, and it's not about doing deep work, it's not about let's go back to your childhood and
Mm.
rehash all of those traumas. It's about identifying an idea of what could have been implanted or an experience that you had, and then overriding that, or using some particular tools that I provide to overwrite that and rewrite that with a positive thing, and to what we call in NLP is reframe a lot
Yeah.
of memories, reframing a lot of different things. But those are the type of people that I really enjoy working with. The really hard workers, the go-getters, the ones that are out there that are just experiencing like they're hitting this glass ceiling and falling back
Mm.
down. They're going up and falling back down. It's hard to pinpoint a particular niche because I've literally spanned the gamut of people that I've worked with. But for most of the time, it's like startups, businesses that are usually between the 3 and 5 year mark, because that's when you really experience that, we're doing good, but we just can't seem to get past this hump type of thing.
Yeah.
And so if I were to narrow it down, I would kind of put it in that area.
Fantastic. All right, Matt Aponte, and just real quick, tell me a little bit about your book that you released this year, The Art of Kicking Ass and Taking Names.
Yeah,
it's one of those books
absolutely.
I want to say, I got to say it like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So really it's just a culmination of the experiences and the techniques and the tactics I've used and implemented in my life over the past 12 years of my entrepreneurial experience. And so what I've done is I've taken the best things that I use even now on a daily basis, morning routines, ways to kind of segment the day, strategies, even down to how energetically our office and our situation is set up to be more productive, certain little things that we don't even think of. I also use a lot of my experience back in, I used to be in video production and photography for 15 years, about how certain types of light temperatures affects us neurologically, the importance of sleep, kind of like biohacking and nootropics. So I take, instead of like spending so much time on all of these, because you can go deep in all of them, I take the best parts of those that have really helped me to be able to become the person that I am today in my success. And I condensed it into that book in a very logical kind of a layering type of process through the chapters that you go through to really help people. Because the point of it is that you can get just as much done in a 30 to 40 hour week as what some people are doing 60 to 80 hours. And the whole intent for the book is to say, hey, look, I get it. You're hustling, you're working, but the whole reason why you're doing what you're doing is to also have more time with your family, with your friends, to experience life, to travel, right? And so how are you going to do that if you're working 80 hours or 100 hours a week, sometimes, of which I was doing? And you begin to feel that disconnect, and you begin to say, no, I can't now, to your children or your wife or your partner or whatnot, because I have to do this. So the whole intent behind the book is to show these very powerful, very simple to implement techniques that you can do on a daily basis, which help you win back your time, win back your life, and establish a good, healthy balance to where you can have your cake and eat it too, or kick ass and take names and feel like you really achieved a lot at the end of the week.
I love it. Matt Aponte, your website, themattaponte.com. When folks go there, what should they click on? What should they grab? How do they engage with you?
Yeah, so there's at the bottom of the page, you can contact me. There's my social channels there. You can reach directly out to me. But you can essentially kind of learn a little bit more about my story. Also, there's a new coaching curriculum that I'm launching, which I'm not sure when this is going to be published, but it should be up there by the time people go and check that out. And also you can learn more about my book. And then if you like some kind of light reading, there's my story too, of kind of my journey from entrepreneurialism since I was 16 all the way to now where I'm 42.
Fantastic. Matt Aponte, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.